thank you ever so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And I've been looking forward to this and excited to hear what we're going to talk about, because most people will know you as the storytelling coach.
Yeah, and I still am.
Yes, yeah, you still teach stories, but today we're talking about changing direction.
Yeah.
And being confident with it. So is this about changing direction with anything in life? Or are you looking specifically at work?
What I thought we could do, which would be beneficial for anybody who watches and for our mutual discussion, is that we look at change as a concept. And then we can talk about whether we want to change directions in life, whether we want to just make tiny changes, tweaks, or we want to change things completely. That's the degree of change that we want to bring in. But let's look at some of the fundamental concepts. What changes, what gets in the way, how we can make it happen. And from there, we can look at the application.
Okay.
Yeah, does that work?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And in all this, to be confident with it.
Yes.
Take us away, Parul.
All right. Yeah, the first thing you wanted me to talk about is, when do we know it's time to change? And I would say I have a very simple test for it. I have a very simple yardstick for it. And I like to call it the litmus test of change. Oh, that's my own terminology. That's my own metaphor I've come up with. And it's a very simple question I would ask somebody who's contemplating change. And this is the first step and we do this in a pretty detailed form when people work with me in one-on-one setting. And the question that I'm getting to is how satisfied you are with where you are at. It's a simple question, nothing clever about it, no tricks involved. No. How satisfied you are with where you are at. And the response is not about what is it and where is it that you are at. What we are looking at is how satisfied you are with where you are at. So let me give you an example, and I'll take a work-related example because I can throw in some numbers and make it tangible for everyone. Okay. Let's say the world of business. You are a business owner, I'm a business owner. And let's take one of the most tangible things, one of the most tangible yardsticks in business, which is income. All right. So as a business owner, you may have, say, again, just an example, a goal of £5,000, making an income of £5,000. Now, you may have that goal as your daily income, which means that in a year of 365 days, you would get 5,000 multiplied by 365, which comes to £1.825 million. Or you could be somebody who says, I want my annual income to be £5,000. Yeah. So here, when I ask that question, how satisfied you are at, the judgment is not whether you want to be that £5,000 per annum coach, or you want to be that £1.825 million per annum coach. It is how satisfied you are with where you are at. You might be or you could be somebody in middle, and you could be making £50,000 a year, and you say, this is exactly where I want to be in my life. And I would say, if that's the answer to the question, then there is really not much need to change, or actually there wouldn't be enough motivation to change. Yeah. You could literally be that £1.825 million per year person, and you could look at your bank balance and say, life sucks. Yeah. I hate this number because I know I could do so much more. So no, it doesn't matter where you are at, what that number is. It just matters how satisfied you are with it. Mm. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the first aspect we have got to look at. And because we are looking at human beings who are and it's hard to define us human beings into mathematical formulae and equation, there is another aspect, there's another dimension to this question that I would ask and explore. And when we address the question, when we respond to the question, how satisfied we are with where we are at in life, we also need to understand that we can want more of something or less of something while we are okay where we are at. So it doesn't mean that I have to be unhappy or miserable or negative about where I am at. I could be pretty much okay, but still look at what I have and say, well, actually, I want things to be different.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so there is no judgment on what is going on. But if you want things to be different, and typically it would be more of something or less of something, then it is time to pause and explore further. Really understand what is it that is going on, because that's a very strong symptom that some change would do you good.
So do you find that mostly you're looking at financial change?
No, it can be any kind of change. Let me give you another example. The financial numbers were just easy. Let's say fitness. Fitness can be another example. I know you're big time into fitness. I'll think of a fitness example. Let's say we are working on our triceps. And I've got dumbbells. I don't have any of them here, but let's say I can very easily do a tricep. I can't get that in the right position with 1 kg, and it's going to be really easy. With 2 kgs, I will start feeling 2 kg dumbbells in my arms after some time, after a good number of reps. When I would pick up a 5 kg dumbbell to do triceps, I can manage just a couple of reps. But that's my absolute tops. If I go anywhere beyond that, I will not even be able to lift it up and do the triceps. Yeah. So I could be the person who's at 2 kgs to do triceps, and I'm pretty happy where I am at. It's not that I hate that I can only do 2 for triceps.
Can I tell you something really interesting in that example though?
Yeah, go on.
The weight of it, whether it's 1 kilo or 2 kilo, it's cumulative. So you may be able to do 50 1K, which is exactly the same as doing 25 2K.
Yeah.
So with the cumulative ability, you could lift more than if you were using 5K.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic point you bring it. I'm just looking at one dimension to just illustrate the example in a very simple way. Yeah, but what you're saying is absolutely right. We have got to look at the overall impact and not just at one dimensional. So what I'm trying to say is I could be the person who's able to do a certain number of reps with say 2 kgs, and I could be pretty happy where I am at, because maybe 6 months ago, I was far away from 2 kgs. But I could be working towards 5. If I want to look at 5 kgs as my next target, then it is time to make a change. And so I can want things to be different without being miserable where I am at. So that's the point I'm getting at.
Yeah. And that's really important, isn't it? That while you're working towards what you want, not to be discontent with where you are.
Yeah.
And to still take the wins of where you are and the joy of where you are in that moment, rather than it be, this is bad, this isn't where I want to be.
Yeah.
And feel no joy in it, because you can bet by the time you get to 5 kg, your mind will always be already be looking towards 10.
Yeah.
And arriving at 5 and then not celebrating the 5 because you're not yet, it's that constant then chase.
Yeah. What you're saying is something that Abraham Hicks talks about a lot. And she says, you will never get it done, and that is okay. And I'm
Yeah.
paraphrasing her, but that's exactly what she says. When you are at A, you want to aspire for B, and it's beautiful because that's how we human beings evolve. But when we get to B, we start looking at C, and then D, and then E. And
Yeah.
that's how evolution and movement happens. And it's great to have those goals and that bigger vision, but it is so important to be okay where we are at. Otherwise, we would just never get it done.
No, no. And you know, how do you think confidence comes into the change?
So one thing is, we've got to understand that, going back to the point that you were saying about being okay where we are at, I think there is an element of confidence in that. While we are working towards our next goal, it is okay to be accepting of where we are at, because if we beat ourselves up, it is just going to make everything harder. When we make things harder for ourselves, well, obviously our confidence is going to dwindle. So the more fun we have along the process, the more ease we have, the more confidence we'll have.
That's true. And there's so much information overload now, isn't there?
Yeah.
That I sometimes think the amount of information and the must-haves and must-dos actually pull confidence down.
Yes.
Whereas you would think it would build it up. Do you have any solutions for that?
Well, I think it is really important to pick up one line of thought or one approach or strategy, depending on what is it that we are working towards, and do it fully and completely. Because as you say, there could be tens of ways to reaching the same goal. And it is very easy to look at other people or read about other approaches and say, oh, that looks nice. That's the whole shiny object syndrome as well.
Yeah.
And get distracted. And when we keep getting distracted, we actually divide our energy and focus. And we don't get enough momentum in any of the approaches. So we just make everything harder for ourselves. So what is actually better than implementing 10 strategies, whether it is fitness or health or wealth, whatever it is we are working towards? Better than that would be to focus on one or two or three, whatever it is, number of things, of a few select things that are aligned with your way of working and with your vision, and follow them and give them enough time to be able to implement them, test them out, tweak them, refine them, instead of getting distracted here and there. When you know that you are taking consistent action in the direction that you want to go, because that's important. If we aren't moving in the right direction, then it's not going to work. We will get there. We will get there. And that is why it is so important not to be distracted and to have fun along the way. Because if we aren't having fun, then we will just worry too much, and there'll be just too much anxiety. And, oh, what if it doesn't work out? What if?
Yes. I can see we've got Jenny and Carolyn with us. So
Hello.
Thank you for joining. Do you know, it was funny. I was watching a movie the other day about hairdressers. And it was quite funny. It was a bit bizarre, but quite funny. And when I left school, I went into hairdressing and I entered a competition. And thinking about it now, it's like, oh, I could cringe, because it was in Cardiff, and it was people from all over the UK. And I was very new. And I went there, and you had to stand in front of everyone, and I had to, I was in the blow drying competition. So I'd had to have cut the hair before, and it was just like the blow drying, finish off, and then judging. And I cringe now thinking back, because I had no idea of the size of competition it was. And I was 17. Would I have entered if I'd known? I can't answer now, but you know, today, to do something like that, we would have all of the information, wouldn't we? And I
Yes.
just, you know, that's why I thought sometimes all the information can actually stop us from doing things.
Yeah. Yes, it is important to know enough to be able to take the next step. But there is really no need to know everything, because that often gets in our way. We'll do the whole analysis paralysis, especially the clever ones. and we will just get in our heads and get in our way, because too much of information can be, it sounds that it's going to be helpful, but often it gets in our way.
Yeah.
But obviously we should have enough information to know what we are doing.
I obviously didn't have any information.
Well, that was good too.
And it was really the same when I went to be a driving instructor. And I mean, there was no Google, nothing there. So I was suddenly self-employed.
Yeah.
And in fact, funny story, Parul, I'd met Chris and he offered to do my accounts for me. And I handed him a carrier bag, plastic carrier bag. And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "All my invoices." And hours I've worked, and it was just papers.
Well, he earned it.
He'll even say today he always wished he'd never offered.
Oh, yeah, that would be hard work. Yes.
But I know you've changed now with your business focus. How long did it take you to decide to change? And what was that final bit that you said, okay, I'm changing direction?
Okay. It took a large part of, well, most of 2021 to make the change. And I had been sitting on this change for a while, to be honest. There were enough cues. For example, when I say I've changed the focus in my business, I'm still doing storytelling, still helping people with stories, helping them build their visibility and branding through stories. But the difference is, before I was speaking consciously in my marketing and all my messaging to coaches and business owners, and now I want to take this work to corporates and to people who are working in the corporate. And I had been noticing things for a while, but I did not make the change. And there was a lot of feedback, let's say, to simplify. For example, I would be speaking to coaches, but I was still attracting corporate leaders who would come and say to me, "Oh, we know you work with coaches, but would you take us on?" A business owner's delight, I would say, when somebody is ready to buy and when they have a conversation on those lines. So I had been noticing that those are the kind of people I attract. And that must be because, well, I'm somebody who was really happy in the corporate, and I was a high achiever and I loved my time there. The only reason why I left the corporate world as an employee was because after cancer, I wanted to focus only on coaching. And before, coaching was a small part of my role, but now that's all I wanted to do.
Right.
So it wasn't the corporate world, but it was my focus on what is it that I wanted to do in the rest of my career. Because after cancer, I wanted different things from my life. And I said, instead of whatever I was doing, which I absolutely loved, by the way, I now decided to focus on coaching, more joy, more meaning. And energetically, I'm still that person.
Yeah.
And I was attracting those people. So I was observing this pattern for a while, and the results I was getting with them were phenomenal. So there was evidence there as well. And when I started noticing these changes, and I realized that the energetic alignment and the results I was getting for that set of people, and it was also more lucrative for me as a business owner, I paused and really said, okay, I can't put this away any longer. I want to really explore what is going on here. And because I'm a coach myself, I was able to do some of it myself, some of this work. For example, I went back to the whiteboard. Whenever I want to make a change, I like to go back to the whiteboard. And I said, I want to see whether what I'm thinking about, the new thing, or I didn't know back then whether it would be a small change or whether it would be a big change. But whatever I'm thinking about, let's go back to the whiteboard and see how is it aligned with me. So I went back and did the values-based exercise, which I've done before for myself in a different ways many times, but I still wanted to do that. I went to Carolyn and said, can you please explain Enneagrams to me? And I did that exercise, and it confirmed what I was thinking on. Enneagram 3, really driven by achievement, admiration, success, all of those things. Biggest fear of being worthless, wanting to make the most of the time on this planet. So I would say deepening my self-awareness, because what was one big step in terms of practically implementing that change. And so once I had enough evidence and confidence that, yes, I was in the right direction, that's when I started speaking to coaches. And then I decided to make the change, and I hired a coach. So I'm working with a coach because I don't want to make it harder than it needs to be. So she's helping me make the changes. But yeah, it took a while because the first step was observing. The second step was, okay, is this a story going on in my head, or is this something for real? And then there was fear and resistance, because I had been speaking to a particular kind of audience for 2 years, maybe more than 2 years.
Yeah.
And there was so much fabulous content, so much I had done. Oh, I'll have to start all over again. But actually that wasn't true, because I was just speaking to a different kind of person.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really hard, but it had to be done. And then there was the whole practical stuff about doing things in terms of creating new content, writing new copy, updating the website, the whole practical stuff. So it took a while, but I got there.
I tell you what a question I had, because when you shared this with me, that even though you were talking to coaches, people from corporate were coming to you. So I just wondered, it's probably two questions. What was it in your copy, what you were writing, that they saw themselves in? And if you change your copy that much, will they no longer see themselves?
That's a very good question. I think this is where we go back to the whole law of attraction thing. When we want to attract, and here we are talking about attracting clients, because this is a very work-related, business-specific example, business-specific question you have asked, Jill. And this is the whole copywriting and content creation is in context of attracting clients. So we don't attract what we want, we attract who we are. Energetically, I was still that person. And you know this because we are such good friends and you know so much about me. I'm still that person. And so even though I was talking about build your business through stories, energetically and based on the life that I have led and the examples that I was giving, well, people were still relating. And anyway, the main focus of my content was my personal stories, because that's the thing I sell, right? And so it wasn't so much about, oh, the whole business coaching aspects. It was all personal stories. And it doesn't matter whether you are a business owner or whether you are a corporate employee, because before those roles, you are a human being. And so it was always a human to human connection. And because I had a background in corporate world and I did pretty well there, it was easy for people to connect, and I was able to understand what they were talking about, and we were able to have those conversations. So I would say it is very important to understand who we are speaking to. Obviously, there's huge value in it, but it is more important to connect with those people at a human to human level. I might say all the right things for a business person, for a business owner or a coach, or now for a corporate leader. But if I can't connect with them, we would never get in a relationship where we would have an opportunity to work with each other, because people work with people. People don't work with, 5 years in coaching or 10 years in consulting in so-and-so corporate organization stats. People don't buy that. People buy people.
Yeah. But it just struck me that it's the energy behind everything.
Yeah.
Is more important than the words.
Yes.
And yet we place so much importance on the right words. And very little on the energy.
Yeah. I would say there's place for both. There is power in getting the copyright, and there is obviously massive power in energy. But I would say without being aligned in energetically, and some people may call it alignment in energy, or some people may say, human to human connection. We can talk about the same thing in different ways.
Yeah.
But unless and until there is some sort of alignment, unless and until I get you and you get me, if that connection isn't there, if that understanding isn't there, everything else would not come together.
Yeah. But the energy definitely needs to be addressed.
Whether we call it energy or some other form of connection, but that basic I get you and you get me, that has to be there.
And something I saw the other day, somebody shared in a group, which I found quite interesting, and I've not heard anybody talk about it before, was that there are two businesses we can have. The business, we are all really good at something, and that is the thing that we can make money at. And then there's a purpose that we want, a purpose that we have in our soul. And we can have both businesses. What do you think of that?
We can definitely have both. From a practical perspective, and just to make things easy, I would say if we can bring both of them together, if I can fulfill my soul's purpose through the work I do or through the life I live, that will probably be the easiest way to do it, and the most effective way to do it, and the most productive way to do it.
Yeah. I just never heard anybody suggesting having two businesses running simultaneously.
Yeah. I would say I definitely didn't have this language about 9 years ago when I decided to, or 8 years ago when I decided to qualify as a coach and focus on coaching. But if you look at it, it wasn't, my personal example wasn't really far from what you said. At that moment, I was looking at making a difference, and I wanted to find more joy and meaning for myself. And obviously get paid in the process, because money is just a fair exchange of energy for the services and for the work that we do.
Yeah.
And so there was that big purpose. I want to create my legacy. I want to make a difference. I want more joy and meaning in my life, want to live more consciously. And I decided to integrate that with my work. Because as a person, work is an important part of my life.
Yes. Yeah, I
So,
know that. You've always
yeah,
said that.
I've always said that. And so for me, the easiest thing to do was to go and change everything up and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is going to be my new direction in life. That's not the only way to do it, but essentially what I did was I took work as the means to fulfill my bigger purpose for myself and for the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And the people that you work with now in corporate, are these people, do some of them want to leave corporate and make a change that way, or are they wanting to just change something within what they do in corporate?
They're actually both kinds of people, but essentially they are the kind of people who I talked about right in the beginning. So they could be people who are unhappy where they are, but by and large, they are the people who are doing well, but they want better things. So they could already be achieving things. They're all doing really well, but they just want to get there a bit easier, a bit faster, a bit quicker, and have more fun and ease along the way. Right. So that's what I was saying in the beginning. You don't have to be in a bad place to want to change.
Yeah.
But wherever you are, there has to be a substantial difference or a significant difference from where you are and where you want to be at to have enough motivation to change.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, anybody can say anything about, go do it. But
yeah,
if it's not something that you want, then they're just words that have no meaning, aren't they?
Yeah. Although I would say when it comes to change, and that brings us to the second point that we said we would discuss, is what gets in the way of people being able to change. And this is something really important to understand. And I would say when we talk about people wanting to change but not being able to change, or why do people not change, we have to understand that whenever we talk about change, resistance is going to be part of the equation. Resistance is part of the change equation. So the first step is to acknowledge that instead of saying, oh, there's no resistance. Resistance is a natural component in the change equation. And this is why working with a coach is so powerful, because they are able to specifically work with an individual and help them identify what are the individual factors that are contributing to that resistance in that person. Because what works for you will be different from what works for me. What makes you resistant towards change, even if you and I are pursuing the same goal or a similar vision, would be different from what makes me tick or what slows me down. But at a very general level, what are some of the key things that come and shoot up this resistance? I would say fear is one. Most of us know about that. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of success. That was a big one.
Yeah.
Am I going to become too big for my boots? What if my friends stop loving me? Will I have to get new friends? What about my current relationships? Is it going to impact my relationship with my partner, my spouse? What about kids? Is it going to impact my health? That was my thing after cancer. If I get too busy, is it going to impact my health? Because I don't want to get sick again. You see, a very warped sense of fear of success. So fear is obviously a huge thing. Then there are a lot of practical kind of things that get in our way, not knowing what is important for us. Because if I don't know what is urgent and what is important from what is just one of the things I need to do or can delegate and ask someone else to do, well, I would never get to it because I haven't prioritized it enough. So lack of prioritization is a huge thing. Perfectionism is another big one, because if I can't get it right, or if I want to learn how to play a musical instrument, but if I can't play it at the level that I'm invited to perform at Royal Albert Hall, I'm not going to do it. If that's what I'm thinking, obviously I would be resistant I would have a lot of resistance towards learning that musical instrument. But if I can say, well, I want to be better than where I am at now, or I want to be able to do this, I want to be able to play at the parties, I want to be able to play for myself just to have fun, it's a different feel. Yeah. So that perfectionism can get in our way, and these become so solid in our habits, and they become part of our identities. Now I'm the person who does things perfectly. If I can't do it perfectly, it's not worth doing. We own those identities, and we just make everything hard for ourselves.
Yeah. And it's sad, really, isn't it? Because
it's sad, really. Yeah. We don't have to do it.
No, but there's a lot of pressure today of, if you go into paint or sing or sew or do something creative, then you should be able to monetize it. And there's not this doing things just for the joy of doing them. That there should be an end result that means that it's good enough to sell or good enough to teach, or as opposed to, well, I really enjoy painting, and but nobody'd ever put it on the wall because it looks like a 3-year-old did it. But
I see what you mean, but I think it comes down to what we want. If I go back to my own example, well, I write poetry and I write content about storytelling and personal transformation coaching. And I would say I can do a pretty good job at poetry, but I don't sell my poetry. I write poetry for the joy of it, and I have that clarity in my head.
Yeah.
But if I'm talking about coaching, that is my main source of income. So that's how I approach both the things are completely different.
Yeah. I mean, your poetry is really lovely.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. But I think it comes down to our own clarity and what is it that we want.
But how long have you been writing poems?
I started writing when I was a teenager, and that was my way of writing, and that was my way of communicating. I have never been the child or the person who talks a lot. And so I used to write during teenage and into my early adulthood until uni. And then I got disconnected with it, and I came back to it in the recent years.
And I mean, I really enjoy your poems, so that's why I ask.
Yeah.
So what do you think in a corporate job gets in the way of somebody getting where they want to be?
So how can people change? How can we make that change? Well, my answer is not just relevant for corporate people, because as I said, I want to talk to you about some fundamentals. And to respond to this question, I want to go back to what is called as the change equation. Not just a metaphor, but actually there's a change equation that exists. And I was, when we decided to do this session, I was thinking, how best would I explain this concept? Because this is the most critical part, right? How can we really make the change?
Yeah.
And this Monday was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday.
Right.
And I thought, well, how about I go back to his famous speech, I Have a Dream, and demonstrate what needs to happen to bring about a change, because that was a speech that literally changed the course of history.
Yeah.
And it feels completely bizarre, isn't it? That speech was done in 1963, only 15 years before I was born, on 28th of August. So it's not so far out that we are talking about.
No, I was already alive.
Yeah, you were already here. And yet the world that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talks about was so drastically different. And so if that sounds good, I would love to illustrate the concept of change through his speech. Yeah, does that work?
Yes.
So what I would like to do is, I'm logged in here on my Mac, and I have Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech here in front of me, because it is such a powerful piece of work.
Yeah.
I don't want to paraphrase it or mess it up.
No, I know.
And I would read out little bit tidbits from here and there from his speech without going into the whole thing, because it was a pretty long speech. So when we talk about making change, the first thing we have got to understand is resistance is going to be part of the equation. The more the resistance is, the harder it is going to make change. So if you want to change, our motivation or whatever is driving us to change has to be bigger than the resistance. Simple?
Yeah.
So the change equation says that there are three components that are required to make the change possible. And these three components, when their multiplication becomes bigger than the resistance involved, that's when change will happen.
Yeah.
And through Dr. MLK Jr.'s speech, I will give you what those three components are. So the first component, which is required in any context of change, and we can go and pick on this concept from a spirituality angle, and we can relook at it from a mathematical, scientific angle, we will land up in the same place. And I'm no historian, I'm no literature person. This is my interpretation of change management and the speech.
Yeah.
So the first component is dissatisfaction. If you aren't dissatisfied with where you are at, you will not build a case for change. It's like saying, my life is exactly how it should be. And if that is the case, then, well, there is really no motivation to change, no need to change, no intrinsic desire to change. And when we look at this speech, I have a dream. It is such a powerful painting of dissatisfaction, because the speaker says, 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. He refers back to a proclamation that was signed 100 years ago, and then goes on to say, even though the proclamation was signed 100 years ago, things were still bad. So people were living the American dream, but that American dream was available only to white people. And he goes on to explicitly use the word black, because it was still probably okay to use it. He uses the N word. It was probably still acceptable. I don't know. But then he tells us what it was like to be a person of color and live in America. And this is 1963 we are talking about. And he says, 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. He goes on to talk about the lonely island of poverty amidst the vast ocean of material prosperity, because that material prosperity is what the American dream promised. And then he talks about more and more injustice and what was really happening to people of color here. And he goes on to say, it's like we have been given a check, but that check doesn't have sufficient funds, so it's bounced. So that was the picture of dissatisfaction. If people aren't dissatisfied with where they are at, they wouldn't change. And that's the first big component of change. So that's really important to understand when we go out into the world as coaches. If we are talking to somebody who is absolutely okay where they are, don't try and make a sale. Don't expect the sale to happen. Why? Because people have to be wanting to change. They've got to want to have something different. So that's the first component. The second component is vision. So I may be dissatisfied where I am at, or I may be okay where I am at, but want something else, something different. But I've got to have clarity. I've got to have understanding of what that new thing is. If I don't have that clarity, if I don't have that vision, the change will become a lot harder, because I would say, oh, I know I want things to be different, but because of that brain fog, that lack of clarity, my resistance to change will be high. And there are a lot of people who come to coaches in this state because they know they want different things. They kind of understand, pick up on the symptoms that they're having because it's making them feel not so good about where they are at, but they don't quite know. So a lot of coaching can also be about clarifying that vision. And if we go back to I Have a Dream, this is a speech that has done that vision absolutely brilliantly. In fact, they have tied in the second and the third component so beautifully. And so Dr. MLK Jr. goes on to tell us what that big vision is. After telling us how bad the current situation was, he gets to a point wherein he says, and I have a dream today. And every time he says those 4 words, I have a dream, and anything that follows after that is his picture of the new vision. And I will read out a couple of examples to you to help you understand what I'm talking about. So one of the things, so this is probably the favorite bit, my favorite bit from his speech. He says, I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. Another thing he says is, I have a dream that one day, even in the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. Massive vision, because it was unthinkable. The next one is, again, one of my probably second favorite bits from his speech. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. Massive vision. And there was this man standing on the stairs of Lincoln Memorial and doing this speech to his audience. So that's the second component, having that vision of how life would look like after the change. But to be able to move from where somebody is at and to be able to achieve that vision, that's where the third component comes in. And that is, what is the first step you will take towards your new vision? Because you may understand that you are not okay where you are at, you want different things, you may have a vision for where you want to get to, but if you don't know what that next step is, it can become too big, too overwhelming. And then it may become so big or undoable, it may feel so undoable that you may not really take any action because the resistance will be too high. And that's where the third component of change is, which is, what is the next action? And in his speech, because we are talking about a time where this vision was literally unthinkable, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. goes on to say, I'll read out his words verbatim here. He says, go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to South Carolina, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana, go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow the situation can and will be changed. For him, for them, the first step was even to be able to have this dream and to believe that this change was possible, because it wasn't thinkable. So the first step that he asks his people to do is to have this vision, to have this faith that this is possible.
And that's powerful.
And that is powerful. In fact, if we look at the speech, they have tied in the vision and the first step so beautifully, because every time he says, I have a dream, he's talking about his vision, and he's telling people what is possible. And he says, go back to where you have come from and know that this is possible. Have that faith. Because until then, well, people would have said, yeah, it would be nice to have a world where the white and the black people live equally, but they had no idea how they would get there. So the first step for them was to know and to believe that this was doable. And so those are the 3 components: dissatisfaction, vision, first step. And this is actually a mathematical equation. So obviously there's statistics applied to it and mathematical formulae applied to it. So that's the science bit of it. So when the multiplication of these three factors exceeds the resistance you have for staying in that situation, that's when change will happen. So if we want to make a change, but we aren't really getting on with it, it's really important to understand which of the three components, what is really at play here. Are we really wanting to make a change? The D, do we know what we want? And do we know how to get there? The first step, it's not about the 10 steps, it's about the next step.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when you get 10 steps, it's so easy to look at the 10th step and not the first step.
Yeah.
And then the 10th step just seems too big, too far away, and totally undoable.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, I think it's important to have an overall big vision, because when we have those big visions, they can really motivate us, they can really inspire us to achieve great things. But that big vision, the only way to achieve that big vision is through smaller goals and smaller milestones. Because if we straight away, if as a new business owner, straight away you decide, oh, I'm going to start making 100K in my business, that'll be too big a goal when you have just started. You might be able to do it. I'm not saying it's impossible, because nothing is impossible.
Yeah.
But an easier way to do it would be, okay, I'm going to first make 1K, 5K, 10K, 20K, 50K, 100K.
Yeah.
And pace yourself up to that big goal. And once that becomes normal, then look at the next bigger goal.
Yeah. And well, whatever, whether, it's not always a financial goal, is it?
No, it's just an example. We can replace it with fitness, we can replace it with literally anything, because what we have talked about today are fundamentals of change.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't matter what nature of work is, what aspect of life it is that we are applying this concept to.
Yeah. And I think it was really powerful talking about, I have a dream, and the way that you broke it down into the three components. That was very powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I like to do I like to talk about change through Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech. That's just one of my things. But it was so timely, considering that this Monday was his day.
Yes, yeah. It was, wasn't it? On our saddest day.
Yes, on our Blue Monday. Yeah.
Yeah, a much better day. I'd
Yes.
much rather celebrate his day.
Yes. Yes.
Wow, this has been incredibly powerful.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed what we've talked about and everything we've covered, and so much. And I don't know whether there's anything else you want to add to that.
Well, there is one thing I would add, because the concepts that I have talked about, I know I've said that you can apply them anywhere, but out of my own experience, I can tell you that these concepts can be applied successfully in respect of change, with regards to change, literally anywhere. Back when I worked in the corporate world, I have run many change management programs, organizational change management programs. And I would say these concepts were applicable there. As a business owner, or while making changes in my own life and business, I have applied these changes, they work. So it doesn't really matter what it is you do, because we are talking about human behavior and principles here. That's the beauty of foundation, right? When we talk about foundational stuff, it's applicable everywhere, irrespective of all the topical variables.
Yeah, it does. It just fits in with everyone, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is going to fit in. Even if you're somebody who doesn't, let's say, look at the scientific or mathematical or the corporate kind of way of looking, well, maybe you come at things from a different angle, say a spiritual angle. These concepts will still apply. If you listen to Abraham Hicks, she says, choose the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
When you want to manifest something, take the path of least resistance. What she's talking about, when we want to manifest something, we are looking at change. We've got to take the path of least resistance. The more resistance we introduce, because of everything that we talked about, the harder it is going to be to manifest things. I think that's the beauty of science and spirituality when we want to bring change in our life, whether it is work or personal life or in any dimension of us. Whether we look at it from the spiritual angle or the scientific angle, we land up in the same place. And they complement each other beautifully.
Yeah. Well, science is starting to catch up, isn't it?
Science is starting to catch up. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Which is great. Fascinating as well.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this has been absolutely wonderful. And I haven't checked the comments, Parul.
Oh, go on, check them.
All right, Carolyn, Gail popped in as well. And Jenny says, fabulously exciting, Parul. So, and Sandeep.
Thank you, Jenny.
Sandeep is watching, and Adrian said, very interesting talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
So, thank you. I didn't actually, the comments, for some reason, they don't show, like they used to, where they just appear. They're just not doing that now. So they've obviously changed something. So thank you. And if anybody wants to connect with you, can you drop into the comments after how they can? Oh,
I'm on Facebook. You can't miss me.
I know we can't miss you, but
I'm part of Jill's group. So you can definitely find me in Jill's group. I'm on Facebook. You can connect with me. I don't mind DMs. I love DMs. Send me a message, send me a connection request. And I'm on LinkedIn. That's another place I hang out.
Yeah. It's and I can tell everybody they'd enjoy talking with you, Parul. I mean, we've been friends for a long time.
Yes. Yes, that's true. Yeah.
So we are going to stop the live stream now and say goodbye to you all. And thank you again, Parul, for being here with us.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.